Charles regained consciousness to a snarling alien visage, inches from his bloodied face. He strained against the cold metal shackles, pinning him to a chair in the dimly lit holding cell. Panic gripped him as his eyes darted around the room, taking in the nightmarish menagerie of alien species confined in transparent cells along the walls. The hulking brute before him, a Rakari guard named Novak, grinned savagely, baring razor-sharp teeth. "Human, you have been chosen," Novak rasped in heavily accented English. "You will fight for the honor of your pathetic species in the Galactic Combat Championship." Charles struggled to process Novak's words. The championship, a brutal tournament pitting the greatest warriors from across the cosmos against each other in vicious, no-holds-barred death matches. An arena where the Rakari aimed to prove their physical supremacy over all other races. And now, with humanity's rapid rise to power, the Rakari elders had decided it was time to put mankind's combat prowess to the ultimate test. Novak leaned in close, his putrid breath washing over Charles. "If you win, human, your species' superiority will be recognized. But if you lose," he chuckled darkly, "let's just say your homeworld will burn." A cold realization settled in Charles's gut. This was no longer about personal glory or survival. The fate of humanity itself hung in the balance. Earth's future would be decided in blood and bone, in the unforgiving crucible of the arena. As Novak yanked him to his feet and dragged him from the cell, Charles clenched his jaw, a determined fire igniting within him. He would fight, he would win, and he would show the galaxy that humans could not be beaten in a fair fight. The holding cell door slammed shut behind Charles as Novak shoved him into a dimly lit corridor. The Rakari guard's heavy footsteps echoed off the metal walls as he led Charles deeper into the bowels of the space station. They passed through a series of reinforced bulkheads, each one thicker than the last, until they reached a massive training facility. As the door hissed open, Charles found himself standing in a cavernous room filled with an array of alien warriors. They came in all shapes and sizes, from the lithe feline form of Zara to the hulking reptilian bulk of Crag. In one corner, a sleek insectoid named Zix skittered across the ceiling, his compound eyes sizing up the competition. At first, the aliens regarded Charles with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Novak shoved him forward into their midst. "Fresh meat," the Rakari guard growled. "A human. Let's see if he can keep up." The warriors circled Charles, their eyes glinting with predatory interest. Zara stepped forward, her tail swishing behind her. "You don't look like much," she purred, her voice a silken threat. "I give you a week before you're bleeding out on the arena floor." Charles met her gaze unflinchingly. "Looks can be deceiving," he said, his tone even. "I'm not here to die. I'm here to win." Crag let out a rumbling laugh. "Big words for a small creature," he said, his voice like boulders grinding together. "We'll see how long that bravado lasts." As the days stretched into weeks, Charles threw himself into his training with a singular focus. The punishing gravity of the training deck threatened to crush him, but he pushed through the pain, mastering new techniques and building his strength. He sparred with Zara, learning to anticipate her lightning-quick strikes, and grappled with Crag, using the reptilian's own mass against him. Slowly but surely, Charles began to earn the respect of his fellow fighters. They saw the fire in his eyes, the unbreakable tenacity that drove him onward. Even Novak, for all his cruelty, couldn't help but be impressed by the human's tenacity. But the training was not without its costs. Injuries were common, and more than one competitor was forced out of the tournament by the brutal regimen. Charles himself nearly reached his breaking point, his body battered and his spirit tested like never before. In his darkest moments, he thought of Earth, of the billions of lives depending on him. And so he persevered, his commitment hardening into an unbreakable diamond. As the date of the tournament approached, Charles caught the eye of Arya, a brilliant Rakari mechanic responsible for maintaining the fighters' weapons and armor. Arya was fascinated by Charles's human ingenuity and resourcefulness, and the two struck up an unlikely friendship, tinged with the promise of something more. "You're different from the others," Arya said one night as they pored over schematics together. "You have a spark in you, a creativity that they lack." Charles grinned. Humans are full of surprises, he said. We're adaptable. It's our greatest strength. With Arya's help, Charles began to modify his equipment, using human tricks and techniques to give himself an edge against his alien foes. A hidden compartment here, a modified power cell there. Small advantages that could mean the difference between life and death in the arena. But even as Charles grew stronger and more confident, he sensed that something was amiss. There were whispers of a conspiracy among the Rakari elite, a plot to ensure that their chosen champion emerged victorious despite the toll. As he lay in his bunk one night, staring up at the cold metal ceiling, Charles knew that he was not just fighting for humanity's honor anymore. He was fighting for the very integrity of the competition itself. And with the odds stacked against him and danger lurking around every corner, he would need every ounce of his wits, his allies, and his indomitable human spirit to uncover the truth and emerge triumphant in the Galactic Combat Championship. The day of the tournament arrived with a thunderous roar of anticipation. Charles stood among his fellow competitors, his modified armor gleaming under the harsh arena lights. The air crackled with tension as the Rakari elders took their seats, their eyes cold and calculating. As the fighters were paraded before the cheering crowds, Charles caught Arya's gaze in the stands. She nodded almost imperceptibly, a silent reminder of the plans they had laid. Charles steeled himself, knowing that more than just his life hung in the balance. The first round pitted Charles against a Grath, a monstrous bear-like creature that dwarfed him in size. As they circled each other in the arena, Charles could hear the crowd's jeers, already writing him off as dead. The Grath charged, its claws raking the air. Charles ducked and rolled, feeling the rush of wind as the creature's massive paw missed him by inches. He sprang to his feet, landing a precise strike to the Grath's knee joint. The beast roared in pain and fury, redoubling its assault. Charles weaved and dodged, his human agility allowing him to stay just out of reach. But he knew he couldn't keep this up forever. Spotting an opening, Charles darted in close, using one of Arya's modifications, a hidden blade in his gauntlet. He slashed at the Grath's underbelly, drawing first blood. The fight raged on, a brutal dance of claw and fist. Charles took hits that would have felled a lesser man, his armor cracking under the Grath's relentless assault. But he refused to yield. In a final daring plan, Charles feinted left, then spun right. As the Grath lunged, Charles used its own momentum against it, sending the creature crashing to the ground. Before it could recover, he struck a precise blow to a nerve cluster Arya had identified, rendering the Grath unconscious. The arena fell silent, then erupted in a cacophony of disbelief and grudging admiration. Charles stood victorious, his chest heaving, blood trickling from a dozen wounds. He raised his arm, not in triumph, but in defiance of those who would underestimate humanity. As the tournament progressed, Charles faced increasingly formidable opponents. He outmaneuvered a Zephyrian whose movements blurred with speed, using carefully timed counterattacks to wear down his lightning-fast foe. Against a Scion telepath, he employed mental techniques learned from Zix, shielding his thoughts and using the alien's overconfidence against them. Each victory brought Charles closer to uncovering the truth behind the tournament. Between matches, he and Arya pieced together evidence of the conspiracy, carefully documenting the subtle manipulations that guided the outcomes of fights. During a particularly grueling bout with a Kragoth warbeast, Charles noticed the creature's eyes glaze over mid-fight, its movements becoming sluggish and predictable. He realized with a jolt that the beast had been drugged, its performance altered to ensure a specific outcome. That night, as Charles nursed his wounds, Arya slipped into his quarters. Her eyes were wide with fear and excitement. "I've found proof," she whispered, producing a data crystal. "Financial records, communications between the elders and the betting syndicates. It's all here." Charles took the crystal, his mind racing. "This could bring down the entire system," he said softly. Arya nodded, her hand finding his. "It's not just about the tournament anymore, Charles. This could be the catalyst for real change on Rakar." As they finalized their plans to expose the corruption, Charles knew that his greatest challenge lay ahead. The next day would bring not just another fight in the arena, but a battle for the very soul of Rakari society. And as he prepared for what was to come, he couldn't shake the feeling that the true test of humanity's worth was only just beginning. Charles gripped the data crystal, its weight seeming to increase with each passing second. He exchanged a determined look with Arya, their silent communication speaking volumes. It was time to act. As the station's night cycle began, Charles and Arya set their plan in motion. Arya's fingers flew across a hidden terminal, bypassing firewalls and security protocols with practiced ease. Charles stood watch, every muscle tense, ready to react at the slightest sign of discovery. "We're in," Arya whispered, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Uploading the evidence now." Across the station, screens flickered to life. The truth about the rigged matches, the corruption of the elders, and the manipulation of fighters spread like wildfire. Gasps of shock and roars of outrage echoed through the corridors. Charles sprinted towards the holding cells, dodging panicked spectators and confused guards. He found Zara already freeing her fellow fighters, her claws making short work of the locks. "About time, human," she growled, a fierce grin on her feline features. "Ready to take down some elders?" Together they rallied the other competitors. Craig's booming voice cut through the chaos, organizing them into a formidable assault force. Even Zyx skittered down from the ceiling, mandibles clicking in anticipation. The group surged towards the Grand Pavilion, a tide of diverse species united in purpose. They encountered resistance, loyalist guards and elite warriors. But the element of surprise was on their side. Charles fought alongside his former rivals, human ingenuity complementing alien strength and agility. Arya's voice crackled over the comms. "Charles, they're trying to lock down the pavilion. You need to move fast." With renewed urgency, Charles led the charge. They breached the ornate doors of the Elder's sanctum, only to find themselves face to face with a wall of heavily armed Rakari defenders. The battle that ensued was brutal and swift. Charles ducked under a plasma burst, rolling to flank their opponents. Zara leaped over him, her claws finding gaps in the guard's armor. Craig's massive form absorbed fire, allowing Zyx to dart in and disable weapons with precise strikes. As the last defender fell, Charles confronted the elders. Their once regal faces were twisted with fury and fear. "Your reign of deception ends now," Charles declared, presenting the damning evidence. The lead elder sneered. "You fool! You have no idea what forces you're meddling with." A deafening roar shook the chamber. The elder's eyes gleamed with malice as he activated a hidden control panel. "Let's see how you fare against our ultimate weapon." The far wall of the pavilion retracted, revealing a monstrous form. A leviathan, all tentacles and gnashing teeth, unfurled itself from confinement. Its eyes, filled with rage and hunger, fixed upon the gathered fighters. Charles didn't hesitate. "Together!" he shouted, charging forward. What followed was a battle unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Humans and aliens, former enemies now united, fought as one against the unleashed horror. Charles coordinated their efforts, his quick thinking and adaptability proving vital. Zara's agility allowed her to distract the beast, while Craig's strength kept its thrashing limbs at bay. Zyx's knowledge of anatomy guided their attacks to vulnerable points, and Charles, using every trick and modification at his disposal, delivered the final decisive blow. As the Leviathan collapsed, Charles turned to the stunned elders. "It's over," he said simply. In the aftermath, a new era dawned. The station buzzed with activity as a governing council was hastily assembled. Charles watched as Arya took her place among the representatives, her eyes shining with hope for the future. But even as celebrations began, Charles knew their work was far from finished. Reports of unrest across the station demanded attention. He caught Arya's eye across the crowded room and nodded. There were still battles to be fought, a new order to establish. Charles stepped out of the pavilion, his allies at his side. The corridors ahead were filled with uncertainty, but for the first time in ages, there was also possibility. The true test of their vision for a fair and just society was about to begin. The true test of their vision for a fair and just society was about to unfold. In the weeks that followed, Charles found himself at the center of a delicate balancing act. The Grand Pavilion, once a symbol of oppression, now housed a diverse council of representatives from all walks of life. Arya sat among them, her keen mind and technical expertise proving invaluable in the transition. Charles paced the corridors, his body still bearing the scars of recent battles. He paused to observe a group of former gladiators, now working alongside Rakari engineers, to repair damaged systems. The sight filled him with a mix of pride and unease. "Impressive, isn't it?" Zara's voice startled him. The feline warrior leaned against a bulkhead, her eyes scanning the bustling activity. Charles nodded. "It's a start, but we're far from stable." As if to punctuate his words, a distant commotion drew their attention. They rushed to find a heated argument between a group of lower-caste Rakari and several alien merchants. Tensions flared as accusations of resource hoarding flew. Charles stepped between them, his voice calm but firm. "We're all in this together now. Your grievances will be heard, but not like this." The crowd dispersed, but the undercurrent of discontent remained palpable. Charles exchanged a worried glance with Zara. They both knew that centuries of division wouldn't be erased overnight. Later, in a private meeting with Arya and other council members, Charles voiced his concerns. "We need to address the root causes of these conflicts: education, resource distribution, representation." A sharp crack interrupted him as the room shook violently. Alarms blared and smoke billowed from the lower decks. "We're under attack!" someone shouted. Charles sprinted towards the source of the explosion, his heart pounding. The scene that greeted him was one of chaos and destruction. Bodies lay strewn amidst twisted metal and sparking wires. As he pushed through the debris, a familiar voice called out weakly, "Charles!" He found Zara pinned beneath a fallen beam, her body shielding a group of stunned civilians. With a surge of adrenaline, Charles lifted the beam, allowing the survivors to scramble free. Zara's eyes met his, a mixture of pain and dedication in her gaze. "Don't let this break us," she gasped. "Stay resolute." Charles cradled her head as she drew her final breath, his knees going weak from the loss. Around him, the station buzzed with panic and confusion. In the aftermath, as medical teams tended to the wounded, Charles stood before the hastily assembled council. His voice was hoarse with emotion, but his words carried weight. "This attack was meant to divide us, to reignite old hatreds," he said. "We cannot let it succeed. Zara gave her life protecting others, not just her own kind, but all of us. That's the example we must follow." Arya stepped forward, a data pad in her hand. "We've traced the source of the explosive materials," she reported. "They match a signature from black market weapons dealers operating in the outer rings." Charles's eyes narrowed. The exiled elders, they're not content to fade away quietly. A heated debate erupted among the council members. Some called for immediate retaliation, while others urged caution. Charles listened, his mind racing through possibilities. Finally, he spoke. "We need to cut off their supply lines, a surgical strike to cripple their operation before they can launch another attack." The plan took shape quickly. Charles assembled a team of trusted allies, Cragg's brute strength, Zix's tactical brilliance, and a handful of others chosen for their unique skills. As they prepared to board their stealth craft, Arya approached Charles. "Be careful," she said, her hand lingering on his arm. "We need you back here." Charles nodded, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. As the airlock sealed behind them and the ship detached from the station, he addressed his team. "What we do today isn't just about revenge," he said. "It's about securing a future for everyone on that station. Human, Rakari, and every species in between. We go in fast, we go in quiet, and we get the job done." The craft accelerated towards the outer rings, leaving the sprawling station behind. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the next chapter in their struggle for a truly just society.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.